Board. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to All Things SOPA. Today is June the 15th. I'm pretty sure that's the right date. At least that's what it says on my screen. My name is Chris Worley. I'm the Director of Technology Services for the Learning Technology Center. And we're here trying to help with All Things SOPA. And a couple different ways that we're doing that is through these presentations, also by working with the Student Data Privacy Consortium and utilizing their National Data Privacy Agreement as well as their database tools. And so we'll go through some of those things and share some of those things. The bit.ly on the screen is now in the chat. But that is the slideshow. This slideshow has been used since February the 9th, and for every week except for a couple Tuesdays. But it's got all the slides in it from those past presentations as well. So there's a little bit of nuggets in the whole slideshow. Also, the playlist there is for the All Things SOPA recordings, as well as I think there's some tutorials scattered through there as well, but I'll also show you where some more of that stuff is at. So as we get started, just share one word about SOPA that you are feeling right now. And I feel like my Google slideshow is going to go crazy here in a second. Yep. But to get to this, go to slido.com. It's in the chat. And then enter the code Z972. Just another reason for this is so that you can get in and be able to ask questions inside the Slido platform, because it makes it easier to work through. So, and it's funny, not funny, in the sense of I've done this on and off over the last 4 months with the one word, and a lot of times overwhelmed is the biggest one. I like LOL as well. Uncertain, I think that's a good word for SOPA. Even though we've been having these conversations, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty around what it's going to look like when it's July 1 or when it's December 1st or even next year, July 1. So, so thanks for sharing that. And the main reason again for getting in here and sharing that is to get you into the Q&A functionality of Slido. So if you haven't submitted your one word yet, join us and do that as well. And again, this is just one of those comfort level things to where it helps me kind of see who's coming in the room and where people are at. So if there's a lot of ones and twos, I can look at that and see what it is that we want to maybe change as far as the presentation goes. But all right. I like those numbers. I like that looking graph. I'm gonna do a screen capture of that and hang it on my wall. It's good to see the fours are winning. Don't anybody else put a number in there, even though there's just, I'm just going to cover up the screen that says there's only 15 people responding. But hey, now don't be. But no, just kidding. Thanks for playing along, and we'll get into the questions and answers. I guess I put my question slide at the wrong place, but it looks like people are starting to find it. So make sure you're putting your questions in the Q&A section of Slido. That way it doesn't get lost in chat in Zoom. Usually the first question I answer is, what is SOPA? And ultimately SOPA is a law that was originally put into effect in July, or not in July, but in 2017. The most recent amendments were in 2019 that will go into effect July 1st of 2021. So there's a lot of links on this page that's linked here as far as informational stuff that talks about having written agreements with vendors that collect PII, personal identifiable information for students, and having a written agreement with those companies to say what they're doing with the data, that they're not renting or selling the data, that they're going to delete it when they're no longer using it, what happens in the circumstance of a breach or some kind of incident, communication, and those types of things. So these resources on this page are more about what SOPA is and why we're doing this. There are some Robin Schwartz informational things there too that are from the legal firm Robin Schwartz that works with a lot of school districts within the state of Illinois. They've done a couple webinars. I think I still don't have one of the links on there from the latest webinar, but check those out if you need further information or need that administrative buy-in that Mia mentioned as we were coming on the air, or on the line, as Vince Vaughn would say. I can't remember what his character's name was in that show, but the internship. It's not really as funny when you have to explain what the movie quote is from, but so definitely keep adding your questions here, and we'll come back to those after a short presentation here. So each week I just share out the statistics of what's happening, where we're at, and you can see that 20 schools have created accounts in the SDPC database. So these are all numbers from the Student Data Privacy Consortium database. Again, this is not a requirement of SOPA. This is just one way of managing agreements for the written agreement requirement that allows you to then post those on a website, and that is free. I still get emails from Student Data Privacy Consortium of people that are trying to get an account and join, and talking about joining as a SDPC member. You don't have to do that. The LTC has paid the Alliance membership, so all school districts in Illinois can access this database for free. If for some reason you can't find your district name in the account in the system, please reach out to me and I can help with that. So that shouldn't cost you any money with the Student Data Privacy Consortium database. As you can see, the signed DPA. So we're going to talk in a minute just about what a DPA is and what the different options are. But you can see that we've increased almost 2,000 agreements since last week. And you can see on the graph on the right top, just that curve that's happening there as we add additional schools, as more schools start adding agreements. So this unique districts with DPAs, that means that even though we added 20 school districts over the last week, we actually added over 50 school districts that are actually uploading agreements. So this number, the 404, is the actual number of districts that have uploaded at least one agreement as we go. The originating DPAs, that number 851, that is the number of originating agreements that have been put in the system for other people to subscribe to or piggyback to. And again, if you don't necessarily understand this language that I'm speaking, I'll link you or show you where the two videos are that'll help with that and get you kind of caught up with some of that language. And that number can be a little bit misleading. That's not necessarily 851 different applications or vendors. That could be just, there's a lot of different variables that can go into that number, but it's encouraging that we're seeing numbers rise, seeing that number rise. And the next slide actually shows what some of those originating agreements are that have been uploaded since the last time that we talked. Again, these are originating agreements that have new, and I'm finding that my spreadsheet that I collect all this information in, that I exported out from the database, may not be totally accurate in the sense of what information, and there may be repeats and different things on here, but I think it's good that you can see, as far as what I know from being uploaded from previous, this is new stuff that hasn't been uploaded since then. So things like iStation. I actually learned what that application did today during the IT Summer Summit, and it helps with dual language learners and some different things like that. Things like Blooms, it's a communication tool. So these are just examples of originating agreements that are out there, that if these are on your list of applications that you're using in your district, you can utilize this list to help check off and look and see what you need to upload or subscribe to or piggyback on. And one more thing about that slide, if you click on the archives agreements, you can go back and see previous weeks lists as well on there in the slideshow. So when I mentioned DPAs earlier, these are the different types of agreements that are available. And I'm going to run through these pretty fast. If there's more information you need, I'll get you a link to a couple weeks ago when I first talked about this. But the number of, or the agreements, ultimately, there's really 3 different types of agreements. There's really can be even more than that, and that causes some confusion and some different things as well. But mainly the originating agreement, the reason for the originating agreement and why that's beneficial to all of us in Illinois and to the school districts of Illinois, is that the originating agreement was between a school district and a vendor, and the vendor is chosen to sign one of the exhibits, which is the Exhibitee of that agreement, to say that it's okay for other schools to subscribe or piggyback on that full agreement. So the vendor signs the Exhibitee, allowing for that subscribing process. So the district signs the full agreement, the vendor signs the full agreement, then the district actually uploads the agreement into the database as an originating agreement, loading the full document, and then they also load the Exhibitee in there, so that when other districts use the auto Exhibitee creator, it will automatically or automagically create that Exhibitee with you signing the bottom of it and sending that Exhibitee off to the vendor. So that's the originating agreement, and that agreement is in place between the vendor and the originating district. I've had a couple questions, and I've seen this as well. You should not upload somebody else's full agreement as an originating agreement. That is up to that school district to do that. I've seen in some cases where a district is uploading somebody else's originating agreement, full agreement, and then they're uploading their signed Exhibitee. And so there's some confusion about that process. And so really the main way of subscribing to an agreement that's in, or an originating agreement that's in place, is to use the auto Exhibitee creator. And so what the auto Exhibitee creator does is it puts in a database or a table all of the originating agreements that have been uploaded, and allows you to then look at those agreements and then sign those Exhibitees, and then it automatically sends it off to the vendor. But that subscribing process is for subscribing to one of those originating agreements. Sometimes originating agreements get uploaded without Exhibitees. I think that's kind of the question. Oh, no, the question, or the question in the in the chat is that you would actually just sign the Exhibitee and then upload that Exhibitee, and that process is automatically done with the auto Exhibitee creator. And then if you do it the manual way, it should link it to the original originating agreement. So when you're looking at it in your database or in your resource listing, you should see the originating agreement and then your Exhibitee that you've signed. And I'll show you an example of that. I'll jump out of here in a minute. The third type of agreement overall is just that standalone agreement that there is no Exhibitee signed by the vendor. There is no subscribing process in place because the vendor didn't sign that Exhibitee. So the vendor wants you to have a one-to-one relationship with them on a data privacy agreement. And there's nothing wrong with that type of agreement. The only issue with that agreement is that ultimately, if it's not the Illinois NDPA agreement as that standalone agreement, then you'll have to have that then vetted by reviewed by your legal team. So in the case of Khan Academy, which has put in their own agreement and had districts sign it, that agreement ultimately needs to be vetted by your legal team to make sure that that's something that they're comfortable with you signing and checks all the boxes for Illinois laws with regards to data privacy. So this checklist, again, is a very important checklist. You can see here on the screen, this is just a screenshot, but if you click on the link or click on the graphic here, it will take you into a spreadsheet that's got this, and you can copy it or do whatever you want to with it. But ultimately, these are the steps that you should be looking at when you're putting an originating agreement in to the database, or you're subscribing to an agreement. You should look at all these different things to make sure that the boxes are checked, the exhibits are filled out, checking the file size of a PDF as you're uploading it to make sure that it actually uploads, looking at the file names and making sure that the file names are appropriate in the right context. And so there's a lot of things on this checklist, and it's really important that we try to do this, because if one person uploads an originating agreement, the idea is that other people will be subscribing to that. And so we don't want to get bogged down in like row 12 and wonder why exhibit A is not filled in. And so then we have to go back, and that spends time questioning if it's something that we can sign on to or not sign on to. And so if we take the time to do it right the first time, then that'll help. The other thing is, if you do find something that you question, if you'll email me right now, that's the process right now for doing this, is email me the vendor name, the district name, and what you feel like is questionable about the agreement, and that's something we can look at and try to build into a workflow to try to correct those issues. So rather than 200 schools contacting one of the schools that uploaded it, if you can contact me, even if 200 schools contact me, that's better than you contacting somebody that's at a school trying to do this. So if you would take the time to do that, that's great. And I did submit a enhancement to the database to try to get that feedback tool as part of the database, so that when you're looking at something, if you just clicked on a feedback button to provide that information to us, that we could do that. And that's what this screen is for. If you find something that would be helpful to using the database, whether it be a view that you would want or something as a school district that you're wanting to do that may be beneficial to other school districts, or even if it's just beneficial to you at this point, put those types of things in this Google form, because that's what the Student Data Privacy Consortium is using to know what to make better, what to upgrade, what to spend money on, what what to do better. So make sure that you take the time to do that if you haven't done so already. The resources page is really the starting point for everything that you do with using the database. So the main navigation for the database is right up here. If you don't have an account yet, and you're watching this video for the first time or watching me for the first time, click on Join ISPA and then find your name in step 3 of the drop down and request an account, and then I can approve that. Other things that are on this page, obviously, are the dates over here for upcoming events. As we move forward and are continuing to do this process, please let me know what other ways of helping you there can be. If we can do things in groups, that's great. I'm available individually as well, but if there's things that would help and benefit you and your school districts with this process, please let me know, and we can continue to add other opportunities as well as these Tuesday conversations. These documents are PDF documents that'll help you if you're just getting started, but also just kind of keep you on track and help with that checklist of knowing what's going on. Again, this is the National Data Privacy Agreement that's available to school districts. That was the Exhibit G and the NDPA portion of the document were created by the Illinois Association of School Boards and the Illinois Council of School Attorneys working group for Illinois. So that was reviewed by attorneys across the state of Illinois. So that's the document that we're using currently. Utilize the checklist there. The sample communications for communicating with vendors is there and available. And then using the database playlist is available to you. It's got a lot of videos in here that would help you find a good exhibitee, the video for what is SOPA, managing your district users. So if you have multiple people in your district that you need to have accounts, you can do that. And then these last 3 videos are videos that are created for, I did some 1-hour sessions at the end of April, beginning of May, that those 2 would be the 2 videos that I would suggest that you start with. And you may even watch them in 1.5 speed or 2 speed to speed up my voice to make it one, go faster, but also it might be a little bit more enjoyable being cartoonish as you're listening to them. So the resources there, the playlists are there. A couple other things that I just added today that are part of the slideshow, but I just put them on this page because I think that makes more sense, is the All Things SOPA YouTube playlist, so you can go back and listen to other things. The slide deck is here as well, so if you can't find the slide deck, the recording for the SOPA for Teachers webinar that we did back in March, as well as the slide deck, is available on this page now. And then also reasonable security practices is a part of the SOPA law as well. And then a link to the ISPE resources for Student Online Personal Protection Act. And those are the resources. And then my screen is pausing. This is just an example of one of those PDF documents that's available for you if you're having conversations with other people around SOPA and what it means and those types of things. This is a good handout for you. And then the playlist is available as well. I don't know if it's my computer or if it's Google. This is the link this is about the press policies that are available to you as a school district. So if you haven't seen those press policies coming through in your updates from the Illinois Association of School Boards, then definitely check out policy 7345 and the administrative procedures and the exhibits there as well. And if you're not a subscriber to press service and you still need to look at those, you can email using this link right here to IASB and request those. And then there's the SOPA for Teachers webinar. Some upcoming things that we're doing at the LTC as far as tech services. Yes, there are more things than SOPA, and I know you guys all know that. But we're breaking out a new way of kind of organizing your tech documentation, kind of an inventory type of assessment guide. So we're doing that on June 23rd. And then in July, the company NetRef is making available a bandwidth reporting tool that we're going to talk about. And then it was mentioned in a conversation not too long ago here at the LTC about have I been pwned? And it's just something that I think we can have a conversation around, even if it's something that you're using or not using. Definitely join us for that conversation. And then the last one there is on Friday, we're actually doing an Intune endpoint management thing with Microsoft that we were originally going to do in May, but it got rescheduled to June. So there's a chance to join us for that as well. And if you're already registered for the May one, you're still registered. And I think you might have got an update about that the last couple of days. All right. So before we go to questions, the questions that everybody always asks is what about Google, Microsoft, Apple, Adobe? Google, I've seen on a couple different email lists today, sent out and I don't know who it was sent to or what ultimately it refers to, but it's an addendum to for Google. And other than that, I don't really know what it means for schools. And it's something that school lawyers will have to look at to see if it's going to be something that is available to you to be utilized and signed. We don't know also what products it actually pertains to, if it's just the core services that would be under the Google Workspace for Education umbrella, or if it includes things like YouTube and Google Maps and all those types of things. So obviously there's always going to be questions around any app, but obviously Google has lots of apps, so it's something to continue the conversation. I still don't have an update on Microsoft as far as if there is an actual Illinois NDPA out there somewhere with a school district that's being reviewed. That was the understanding that I had, that Microsoft had communicated with some schools with that. Apple is also wanting to do something with school manager. So the Apple School Manager application, but again, trying to figure out what that mechanism looks like and how it would be displayed on your website as a written agreement is something that we're still trying to figure out, and I still don't have an update on Adobe. All right. I can't get through it much faster than a half hour. So do I have my questions on there? I don't. All right, so I gotta go back to my slides. Before I do that, before I go back to my slides, upcoming events, obviously all things SOPA, June 22nd, check that out. Come back and ask additional questions, learn more as we go. Ask questions, and then my contact information is on there as well. Okay, so audience, question and answer, Google update. See, I just did it. And I didn't even know that question was going to be there. All right, take an entry. All right, I had a vendor say that they are COPA and FERPA compliant and they won't sign on SOPA? Do I need to pursue? Ultimately, it depends on what the vendor is, but that's ultimately, and I'm going to just put this out there first, that ultimately that's a lawyer question, and sometimes I may go too far when I'm answering some of these questions, and make sure you're consulting with your lawyers and your administration and everybody with things like this. But the vendor, if they're a K-12 education focused vendor that has PII, then there needs to be a written agreement with them to be SOPA compliant. If they don't have a written agreement, if you don't have a written agreement with them in some way, then ultimately it's not going to be SOPA compliant, and that just leaves things open if you don't have that. Will the June 22nd be the last all things SOPA? No, it will not. We are going to continue through July. I have it scheduled for the 13th, 20th, and 27th of July. So do I have it scheduled for the 29th? I do have it scheduled for the 29th too. So yeah, so Tuesday afternoons, it's the place to be, is here for all things SOPA. When adding subscriber DPAs, who is the requester? The designated LEA rep. So that is the designated LEA is the local education agency. And so that rep is whoever is in your district that is going to be the one that is the representative for the district when you're communicating with a vendor. So that will differ from district to district, but definitely, hopefully that answers your question. If a school removes an originating agreement to fix it, will that affect other schools that have already piggybacked? Exhibitee isn't checked. It depends on how that's done. Ultimately, if you go in and I guess I haven't verified this, but if you go in to change into manage agreements and then click on change agreement type, and do that, I believe it will allow you to upload a new originating agreement and keep that relationship in place. So the other districts that have piggybacked on that agreement will be in place. The place where, so as far as like uploading an Exhibitee, or if the check mark on page 2 is not checked for Exhibitee, that would be a good example of doing that change agreement type and doing it that way. If for some other reason that there's something in there that is like it's missing an Exhibit A or something along those lines, or whatever, if it's a bigger issue, I think you'd be better off starting from scratch and ultimately deleting that. But before you deleted that, please either let me know that you're deleting it so that I can work through contacting all those, helping contact those districts, because they would still be subscribed to that agreement. And I'm not sure what would happen with that. So if you actually remove an originating agreement, their agreement should still be good, but what happens to that relationship, I'm not really 100% sure. If there's a specific person that vendors should contact if we have questions or need clarifications on anything SOPA related. Is there a specific person that vendors should contact? I mean, ultimately, vendors should be communicating with lawyers as far as about the law and what needs to be there. If they have questions about like the general use of the Illinois NDPA and what in general it is, I'm happy to answer those questions and help with that process to getting them started. So that's something that I can work through. And if you watch that Illinois NDPA, that's maybe one way of getting vendors some more information, is to send them that video about the Illinois NDPA and the actual document, and then that might be a way for them to get more information. The Power School DPA lists numerous products. It is not easily to search for parents and staff. Can it be broken up by individual Power School products somehow? Ultimately, the best way to do that at this point is that we would have to list it under each product. Ultimately, it's still not going to be easy for parents and staff to look through.
Yeah, so this was actually something I encountered today when I was cleaning up some of the resources on our own public-facing site. So the software suite that I was looking at was Renaissance, which has websites such as Myon.com and Freckle.
Sure.
And in the agreement that we signed an Exhibitee with a school district where it lists all of those particular websites, even though our district doesn't use every single website that Renaissance uses.
Yep.
So the solution that I did, and I'm going to go back to my team with this since I discovered this, is in the purpose section, I listed this company is what hosts the website our district uses, which is Myon.com.
Yep.
So it gives us permission to use Myon.com. So that's how I approached it at this point. If that helps anyone else, I hope it does. Like I said, I have to go back to my team and be like, okay, yes, Myon is owned by Renaissance, but we don't use everything with Renaissance. So we're going to list it in the purpose section.
Yeah,
or I'm going to recommend it. I tested it first, and then we'll talk about it and see would that be easy for your teachers and parents to follow.
Yep. Yeah, that is really probably the easiest way to do it. The way I was going to suggest doing it was that ultimately we could take the agreement and make it originating for each product that is related to a product within the agreement, but still have the full agreement there. So when you saw it listed, you would, and using the Renaissance example, it'd be Renaissance Learning, Freckle, and then it would have the full agreement, and then the Exhibitee for you to sign to send it. And then if there was another product for Star Math, then you would sign that Exhibitee and send it. The problem is that ultimately that's going to be confusing to the vendor, and it may give you more clarity because you're going to see those different applications listed on your resource listing. But again, it's not necessarily going to help that parent go into the agreement and look and see what data is associated with what application. But right now, that's really all we got to work with. Is the purpose is probably the easiest way to just list out those applications that you're using within that agreement. I cannot create an Exhibitee creator for Learn Platform. 2 schools are listed as Illinois NDPA when in fact they are not. That's something I'll check out. If you want to email me so I know who to communicate with, I can see what that is all about. Finding and originating agreements are incomplete. Exhibit A's, Exhibit F's, Exhibitee not checked, but yeah. So ultimately, at this point, you just need to email me and let me know what specific agreements those are. I mean, obviously with 800 originating agreements out there, there may be some things wrong with some of them. So if you're finding that, just let me know what they are, and we'll try to facilitate getting that updated and fixed the best we can. Booklet, New Linux was an originating agreement. I looked today and it is not. Not sure why it disappeared. Several schools piggyback from NLSD. So that was an example of something that was brought up last week, and I will double check and see what the issue with New Linux is. But I want to say that New Linux actually had somebody else's originating agreement up there. And then other people were subscribing off of that based on, so there was some confusion about what the agreement was and who was up there. And so I will double check on that. And if you're the one that posted that question, please reach out to me and that help me help you figure out what that issue was. Ultimately, this is a question for lawyers, and I think, is an agreement needed for Zoom? Our kids do not log in. They type in their first name only. Is a first name by itself considered PII? Ultimately, those are going to be questions that a lawyer is going to ultimately parse. Eventually, we'll have more information about that, but I don't have information that that I've heard from other schools or anything like that. That would be something as a collective that we could start to gather information like that. Like, in what cases do we need to have an agreement with a certain company, and using that example of, does first name constitute PII? So I don't have an answer to that, but that is something that is ultimately a question with a lot of different apps, and ultimately trying to parse through that does become an issue, and hopefully over time will help understand that and know what the ones that have to have an agreement and the ones that don't. When loading subscriber DPAs, it asks media release, is this required? What is this and how does it work? No, it's not required. It's probably something that's in the database because of what other schools across the nation have requested to be in the database for some requirement that they may have, whether it's at the school level or at a state level. But it's not something that should be required or necessary for you. If you have a way of using it, then you're more than welcome, but it shouldn't be a required field by any means. If I look under manage agreements, I can see an active agreement with a vendor. However, when I look at view prepared exhibitees, it's not there. So view prepared exhibitees, you'll only see things in view prepared exhibitees when you have clicked the button in the exhibitee creator to prepare an exhibitee for somebody else to sign. And I'll jump in and show you that here in a second. So I'll leave that question up there and then we'll come back to it. We have no intention of suspending or blacklisting any program associated with Google Workspace for Education. Is in the interim, what can we place on our SDPC? Yeah.
Can I share the experiences that I've gained from Sean Mullins?
Yep.
So Sean Mullins is the one of the directors of technology in the state of Illinois, and he has created the YouTube video series for SOPPA. What he is doing in his district is he's going to list Google as in use, no agreement. Chris, I don't know if you wanted to add more onto that to show that, like, you know, the good faith effort is being put there.
Yep. So that's definitely something that you can do, is when you go in, instead of actually uploading an agreement, you just go in and put that it's in use but no agreement, and then don't upload an agreement. You could ultimately create your own PDF document that has explanation of different things and upload that as an agreement, even though you're saying in use no agreement, but upload that as a document that could be seen, or ultimately create that PDF document, post it somewhere on your website, and then link that in purpose or something like that as well, or on your description, your customized description of that web page. Just say anything that says in use no description, and then you could have an explanation for that. So and that, I mean, ultimately you're going to have things like that, whether it's Google or other examples of smaller applications. I mean, there may be applications that you're going to continue to use, even though you're not going to have a data privacy agreement. And you, I mean, having an explanation for that is probably better than just not listing it or not having it. When you see two agreements, doesn't matter which one you choose. What does vendor-specific agreement mean? The vendor-specific agreement ultimately, and this is something that that I'm getting a little bit of pushback from the national level with the Student Data Privacy Consortium and other alliances across the country that are, when we're uploading agreements as a national agreement rather than a vendor agreement, the vendors are going back to other alliances in other states and saying that, well, Illinois signed the national agreement. And ultimately, a vendor-specific agreement has to do with the language in the Exhibit H. So if there's anything in the Exhibit H that is contrary to what is in the NDPA agreement, then ultimately it should be a vendor-specific agreement versus a national agreement. So vendor-specific ultimately should have, or if it has an Exhibit H, it should be a vendor-specific agreement, is what that ultimately means. And that's something that we're gonna try to flag all those that are in the database and try to help with that process of working through those issues. All right, so let's get out of questions for a second and look at, so as, and this is, I'll put this in the recording, this will be in the recording. So if you do have other questions, please continue to ask those. So we can look at a couple different things while we're in the database. And then I'll also link, I try to link, and I don't think I did it with last week's video. I'll link the timestamps to specific things like what we're looking at now. So let me make sure I answer the question first before I go on. Active agreement with a vendor. All right. Get my view out of the way here. All right. So when you're looking at view all state DPAs, you're going to see in one of the, and this is a good thing to share with you because you're going to see this little gears spinning up here, circle spinning, and that means it's loading all 10,000 plus agreements into this table, and then it's going to put them into 25 pages or 25 rows per page. So that's why this page takes so long to load. And I'm working with SDPC to see if there's anything that could be done about that, because it's only going to get worse. And it seems like it takes even longer when you're trying to do something. It's like dial-up, right? Some people don't know what dial-up is. At least I'll have a recording. Maybe I should send this to SDPC, because this isn't really going to be, there we go. All right, so you can see the loaded, those 10,000 entries. And if you look, that's 731. And I think what I had in my chart was 10,555. So we already have almost 200 more agreements since 11/30. But what you can see inside this table is you can see the agreements that are there. You can see the originating agreements that are here, the ones that have the exhibits and all that kind of stuff. So you can look at this and see what's available to you. Another way of doing it is to just go to the Auto Exhibitee creator. And the Auto Exhibitee creator should have all of the originating agreements. So earlier I said we had about 851 agreements. So 821 originating agreements that are showing up in the Auto Exhibitee creator. So within here, I can search for, say, Edpuzzle, and I can see that there's 2 agreements in here. So earlier, the question was around view prepared exhibitees. So if you look at view prepared exhibitees, there's not going to be anything in there unless you have clicked on this button. So what this button does is it's going to prepare an exhibitee to be signed by somebody else when they log in, or you later when you go to see those. So this is for if you have a superintendent that wants to sign the agreements, but you are the one going in and figuring out where the agreements are and that kind of thing. So you can click on prepared exhibitees, and then it would show them under this list when that user logs in, or even when you log in as well. So then the other kind of question is, how do you choose between one or the other? And ultimately, it's just you have to look at the agreements and see what's there. You can look at the dates. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes it doesn't. But if you look at the agreement, and this is all in that checklist that I shared earlier. So looking at the version number of the agreement. So this is the newer agreement. You can also see down here that agreement was created on this document was created the March 15th document. So this is between Lincoln Prairie and Edpuzzle. If that doesn't match what's here, like if Lincoln Prairie SD, then I would not sign the Exhibitee. And that, I think that was what was happening with the new Linux one. But I'll look at that to see what the issue is. So as you're looking through this document, knowing which one to sign, again, looking and seeing the check boxes are there, looking to see that it was filled out by the local education agency, the provider of the solution, the document signed, looking at the different exhibits and those types of things is things that you should look at before signing an Exhibit E. If you look at this one, this is a version 1. So this one was by Orland School District 135 using the originating agreement from October. So again, these are legal documents. People that have signed Exhibitees already are good to go. The other thing to look at is the Exhibitee to make sure that when you actually sign it, it's going to be the document is going to be emailed to this email, because the originating agreement uploader put that in the database. It's signed by the person, and then the bottom of it is going to be replaced with your contact information, your information when you actually sign that agreement. So by looking at both of these agreements, we can see that they're both signed by Edpuzzle. They both have agreements. Ultimately, what it comes down to is, in this case, is do you want to sign Exhibit 1A, or do you want to sign Illinois NDPA version 10A or 10? And ultimately, that's a question for your lawyer. If there's only a 1, can you sign that? If there's a 1 and a 1A, which do they prefer that you choose? And at that point, you would click on Create Exhibit E or Prepare Exhibit E. And when you do that, it'll come up and ask you some more questions about what to do or what information you want associated with that agreement. And then once you complete that, it'll sign the bottom of that agreement and put it in the database for you to have as part of your resource listing. And I'm not sure why that's taking so long, but I'm going to let it finish just because I want the recording to see how long it takes. As it's doing that, I'm going to flip back over here. Are there any other questions? Is there anybody still in the room? All right, there's still 25 of you still in the room. Sometimes I forget to see if I'm just talking to myself or. And this, I mean, obviously this isn't ultimately acceptable either. Has anybody on the call, has anybody else experienced this, or is it just me and at this point of the day?
I experienced the same thing.
Okay, thanks, Rochelle.
After we had our meeting, I did 2 auto E.
And did it ever eventually come up, or did?
Yeah, it took a long time.
Okay, all right.
But it eventually came up because that was my question about Learn platform, because I'm trying to subscribe to the Illinois NDPAs that's listed.
Okay.
But I wanted to do an auto E creator.
Okay. All right. I will coordinate with, thanks Tim for sharing that you're also experiencing that too. And Eric, when you say you got one to generate 10 minutes ago, did it take this long, or did it? I mean, I've never had it take. This is not even.
It was weird. It seemed like I had to kind of go back and click it again.
Okay.
But yeah, then once I kind of got there and I went to check my agreement,
Okay.
and it had my name and everything on the Exhibitee.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm just going to kind of leave it at that and not, I'm going to do, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to and just show, open this in another, because really that clicking on that button shouldn't take that long, because it's still asking you questions about it's still going to ask you questions. So I don't know if it's actually creating the PDF document at that point that would be causing the issues, or if it's something else that's going on. So I will definitely raise that issue with SDPC. So ultimately what should happen is that when you subscribe to an agreement is in your custom resource listing, it will have the original agreement listed. So when you click on that, you should see the original agreement just as you saw it before you subscribed or piggybacked on that, created that Exhibitee. And then below that should be the Exhibitee that is signed by the system and created and emailed out to that email address. So this is the signing portion. So this is the person that signed it, and the date and the title of the person that signed it. And then this is the information that is the designated representative of your district. So, so that's what should be happening when you're signing an Exhibitee. And yeah, I'm not really sure what that's doing. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And so that email or that contact information is on the very first slide. If you want to schedule a meeting with me, you do click schedule a meeting, and that'll take a look into my calendar, and you can schedule 15-minute or 30-minute conversations with me. Not seeing any other questions, and also it's 3 o'clock. I thank you for joining me today. And I'm going to answer David's question here real quick. Can you upload and save agreements? Yes, you can do that. So if you go to add a new agreement, yes, I have an agreement. Depending on if it was originally a national agreement or a vendor specific one, then you would choose one or those others because you're a subscriber. So you're going to upload, you're going to subscribe to an agreement that's already there. Once you click on that, it'll ask you what the resource is. So if you choose Edpuzzle, then it'll also determine whether or not there's a 1 and a 1A. So in the case, I would want to do a 1A. And when I click on continue, the next step should be uploading that 1-page document that you've signed and upload. So, and then that will link it in to your database, and then you can check off these things and add this information as it applies to your district. But that's also in those videos. So if you need help doing that, those videos are there as well. All right, so I will obviously have something to do before next Tuesday, because I'm going to get a lot of emails if that's happening to everyone. And I think I know I've gotten a couple about some Exhibitee situations already. So definitely continue to reach out, continue to ask questions, and we'll figure out what we can do to make all this stuff work for you guys, and continue to work as a collaborative and making this process as collaborative as we can. Obviously, with 674 school districts with accounts in here, we're going to have some things that are not exactly right, but we're definitely making more progress than doing it together versus everybody off doing their own thing and doing it. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you next week if I don't talk to you before then. Thanks. Bye.